Welcome back. This is video number 5 in a tutorial series for PTC Creo, specifically geared towards FRC robots. Today we're going to do some basic assembly, and to do that the first thing we need to do is make a few parts to assemble. What I'm going to do is work on the Versa chassis. If you go to Vex Robotics or Vex Pro. You can look at Versaframe and Versaframe stock. These are some different stock that you can buy from Vex, and typically it has some pre-drilled holes in it, and you can put it together with some gussets. If you look at the overview, they have some neat pictures, and we're going to do just a small little square that is put together in this fashion, where they have gussets, typically where it would be riveted, and build a frame out of it. There's lots of robots that are built using this type of construction. So first thing we're going to do is build some Versa stock. So we'll go and get a drawing of it. You actually can go down on their website and download a solid model of it. I don't necessarily like to do that because it's just a dumb solid, something you can't edit or add or change things on. So I like to, it's a pretty simple thing, so I like to draw it myself. And we're going to do the 2x1 aluminum stock with pre-drilled holes. So this is basically the shape we're going to drill. So we're going to draw and extrude a rectangle, basically a hollowed out rectangle, and then we're going to extrude it out and then put a hole pattern in it. So we'll open up Creo and we'll do that. We'll make a new part, and we're going to call this one, we'll just call it Versa stock, and we'll do it 2x1 we'll make it 12. And I usually, you can do the naming conventions however you want. I usually kind of do the size if it's 2x1, and then 12 inches long, because I usually have several of them that are different lengths. But I want to do it as a part and as a solid, and I'll say okay. The first thing I'm going to do is draw the end of it. So I'm going to pick on a plane. I'm going to say extrude, and you can see that I did it in a little bit different order than I did in the past. I picked the plane before I did extrude. You can click extrude, then it'll ask you to click a plane. But we'll go to sketch view now. When I'm drawing, if we go back to the drawing, I'm going to draw this view right here. And when I draw rectangles, and especially for something like this, I like to keep my planes in the middle of it. Just makes assembling and disassembling and doing things and manipulating a little bit easier. So what I am going to do to help me do that is make a couple center lines. Start on the origin, another center line at the origin, one going vertically and one going horizontally. Then I'm going to middle click, go to a rectangle, and then I'm going to start in the upper left quadrant and then go down to the lower right quadrant and kind of let it snap where it's trying to center, make everything symmetrical around the top and bottom. And then I'm going to middle click away from it, and it's already trying to put 2 dimensions in there, and I'm going to go ahead and use those dimensions that it's already provided. I could click on dimension and add one, but it gets to the same result. So I want to make it 1 inch and 2 inches high. Okay, so we have a couple of the dimensions already created. Now I want to add another rectangle inside of it, I'm going to let it do the same thing where it tries to snap and make it symmetric around the two center lines that I made. And then I'm going to add a dimension from there and add a dimension to there. I want that one to be 0.1, that to be 0.1. In doing that, everything should be fully constrained if it's set up and snapped to the symmetry like it should if you put the center lines in there. Now if you hit the OK, it's going to try to extrude. And you can see it's extruding out of the plane, and like I say, I like to keep planes when I'm making parts and where they have them in the center. So one neat thing to do that I like to do is use this. When we extrude, we can extrude to a depth, or we can extrude from the middle. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to extrude this 12 inches. And what you can see when I extruded it from the middle, it puts a plane right in the middle of that part. So basically 6 inches of the parts on one side, 6 inches of the parts on the other. Like I say, it can be really helpful if you're trying to, set up a chassis or something to have a plane that's located right in the middle of it. So if we look at our part, we've got the tube, the Versa chassis tube or the structure. We have planes in the middle of both parts, right in the middle there as well. So now I'm going to make the holes. You can see these holes right there down the length of the tube. So I can't remember what diameter were they. 0.163. They're 1/2 inch spacing from the wall and 1 inch between each other. So make a hole and select the top surface to put it on, and then we can use these green tabs and drag one to that center plane, and then drag the other one to the edge. And the one to the center plane, we want that distance to be 0. One to the edge, we want that to be 0.5. The diameter, I believe, was 0.186. And the depth I want to make to a surface, and I want to go to this back surface here, and I want to say OK. So I've got one hole. Now I want to basically pattern that where it goes all the way down this, just like the drawing has. So I'm going to click on my hole and click pattern, and then I can either click, there's different things you can do, dimension, axis. You can do the same pattern with either a direction or a dimension. I'm going to click on the dimension. I'm going to make it 1 inch, and you can see that it's trying to pattern one right there. I've only told it to make 2 holes, but I can up that. I know this was a 12-inch bar, so I believe I need 11 holes, but we'll see. So I put 11, and nope, actually you can look and see where the patterns are. I needed 12. So I'm going to need 12 holes, go all the way across. I'm going to hit OK. So well, that's I made my first tube, so I'm going to say that's good. I'm going to save it. Say OK. And I haven't gone through this yet, but if you want to make sure all your parts are saved to the same location every time, it's good to go here. Where is it at? I believe it's in file. No. I know exactly how to get to it when I first open. I'm going to go ahead and close this just so I can show you where it's at. There's one right here. It says select working directory. When you first open Creo, it'll be there. So if you select working directory, and you can pick exactly where it's at. There's a way to get into it when the part's open. I'm just not sure what it is at the moment. But either way. what we're going to do now is download a gusset. So if we go back to Vex Pro, and we'll get the corner gusset. We've already made one. You can use the one you've drawn. If you've been watching all these video series, we're just doing the 90-degree gusset. So we're going to go to it, actually download their part, CAD file, 90-degree gusset. I want to right click, save link as. I'm going to put it, go to my desktop first, and to Creo, and it saves it as a zip file. I'll open it in my folder, and I can extract it. Okay. So basically I have this part here ready to use. It's the same part here that I'd already downloaded once. I've got my Versastock in that same directory. So now I've got the parts that I need to make my assembly with, so I'm going to make a new assembly. So I'm going to click on new. Instead of hitting part this time, I'm going to hit assembly. And what I'm going to do is name it, let's name it box, because I'm going to make a little bit of a box with it. Say OK. So now what I want to do is I want to assemble part, and I want to go to my desktop. I want to go to first, Creo, and I'm going to put my piece of Versastock in there. And then I'm going, once that's in here, you can drag this part around, move it up and down a little bit. But to place it permanently where it can't be just simply moved around, if you go to placement, and then you can basically select something on the component like a plane or a surface, and you select it, and then you can select the assembly will actually have its own coordinate system and planes, and we can move this part to these coordinate system and planes. So right now that part is, this plane is aligned with this plane, and I could, the coincident means they're going to be on top of each other, or I could put a distance to them where I could, move it away from it 1 inch, move it up or down, -1 inch. But for this one, I want it to be coincident. I want it to be on the same plane. So that plane's line on that plane. I want to add a new constraint. I want to make this plane line up with this plane. Then I want to add a new constraint, and I want this surface and that surface, I want them to be 6 inches away from each other. Oh, it went the opposite direction that I wanted it to go, so if I just put -6, it'll go correct. So I hit OK. So I've got my first part in. Next I want to put a gusset in, so I'm going to go to Assemble, and where that gusset is, it's actually a step file, so I need to show all files, and I'll pull that gusset in and then bring it in as a part. So now the first thing it wants to do is trying to place it. One thing I have found that's kind of handy is if you use these controls to kind of move the part kind of in the general orientation you want it to be, it usually assembles a little easier. So I want it to basically this to set on top of that. So I'm going to orient it that way, and basically you can just click on any of these to move it however you want it. You can translate it with the arrows or rotate it with the circle pick by just using the left mouse button. But I'm going to go to placement. I'm going to select a component item, select this bottom face of that component, and then I'm going to select the top face of the tube. I want to tell them I want those to be coincident. So basically it puts that gusset right on top of the tube. And I want to add a new constraint, and I want this hole, I'm going to select the inside of one of these holes. Oh, I accidentally selected the top, you can see. And since I did select that, I can come over here and click it. I can right click and say remove. So I want to select the hole, and you can see right now it's highlighting something that I don't want it to highlight. But if you right click, it'll go to the next. Just keep right clicking until it gets the surface you want. And it's not showing it because it's really trying to select something on this one. And I want to select a hole, and then select a hole. Okay, so it's moved there. So now this is mostly constrained but not fully constrained. So if I say okay, I can click on this, and this could actually, basically it's sitting on top of this and sitting on there and that hole, but there's nothing keeping it in this direction. So I'm going to add one more hole. So I'm going to say edit definition, placement, new constraint, and select that, and there. I'll say OK. So now I've got a gusset in there. One thing that I did notice when I imported the gusset, it just gave it a default part name. I probably should have named it something a little more user friendly so I could go and find it later, either the part number from Pro or named gusset, something I could find easy. But you just have to remember to do that. I'll assemble again, and I know this part 001 is the gusset. I'm going to put another one in on the other side. Like I say, I'm going to move it about where it needs to be to place it in there, and roughly the orientation. I'm going to say placement, select component item, select that top surface, bottom surface, new constraint, select that hole, new constraint, select that hole, that hole. Alright, now it's fully constrained. Now I can put in another one of these tubes. So I'm going to assemble versus stock. Say if you move it in the general orientation, doesn't have to be perfect, but just close, it really helps out. Do that top surface, that surface, want them coincident, new constraint, that guy, and that one, constraint, and that, and that. Alright, so I've got that leg done. I'll go ahead and do another one. Versus stock, it's already got the right one for me. Rotate it, general orientation, top surface, and then, so I didn't realize what I did, but somehow I selected the whole part, and you can see that this part's not fully constrained, so it gives a little box over here saying it's not. So to go ahead and completely constrain it, you can edit definition. It'll go back to the placement side of it. I didn't select anything. I must have misclicked. So if I basically go back and try to do what I was previously trying to do, got one constraint in, do the next one. So got a couple sides of it. Now I need another gusset over here. And a lot of times, if you haven't saved something, it's not showing this part right here. But I can go to In Session, and anything that I'm working with, even if I haven't saved it, it'll show up. So move it to the orientation close to it. So something didn't go quite as I'd planned there. Either I clicked the wrong surface, did something, you can look at it, it's not lined up quite how we expected. So you can look up here when it tried to place in the constraints, it selected on a tangent for some reason rather than a coincident. So I can right click on that, say delete, and I can try again. Try to put a new constraint in, click that surface, all right, fixed it. Say okay. Now I'll go ahead and put in one more just to finish it off. Alright, now placement, click on surface, hole, and just depending on the part and how it's oriented, depends on how many different constraints you need to put on it. Typically you need to put 3 constraints in to hold a part, not always. Sometimes, like with shafts, you can put in 2 and it says it's fully constrained, but most of the time you need to put in 3 constraints or more, but most of the time 3. And then put one more versus stock in. And you have to be really careful when you start getting big assemblies on how the order you assemble things in and how you constrain things, because say if you want to delete something in the future, if you've built something that requires some other parts to be there to know its position, if you delete or modify those parts, it's going to change things. I'll show you a little bit about that. I've built this in such a way that I can demonstrate that. And I'll do one more constraint over here. Alright, so right now we've basically put this part together, have a box. It's pretty handy. If I were really kind of building this on a robot, I would have gussets put on the bottom as well. Once they were completed, I'd put rivets in these holes, drill out these extra holes, put rivets in those as well. But just to assemble it in CAD, that's not really necessary at the moment for this demonstration. But I will show you that this original part, since it was basically placed in reference to this plane, I can edit the definition and I can change its location. Since I had its distance 6 inches away, I can move it 2 inches away and it'll move right there, and the whole model moves 2 inches. Everything moved because everything's kind of tied to these particular parts. So I can, I'm going to go back and put it where it was. But one thing that's not quite as handy. Say if I wanted to delete this one, this part. If I say delete, and it's saying, hey, if you delete that, these other highlighted parts, like this part here, this gusset here, it's gonna end up being deleted as well because they're all relying on this part for their location. So that's one thing you have to remember when you're building assemblies, is if you're going to go and change any of these parts that these other things are assembled to, they may come back and make it a little bit of a hard time in the future. Okay, so you can see it deleted it when I said okay, but I'm going to hit undo just to get back to where we were. But that's I'm going to wrap up the video with this. That's been a pretty long video, longer than I meant for it to be, but you can see how to assemble things. I recommend going and finish off the rest of this. You can basically build most of the robots that we have with the extrude, the revolve, and then the assembly features. But if you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you enjoyed it.